As many of us are getting ready to gather with our friends and family tomorrow, we have some very special guests from the Indigenous community here in Colorado who will share the true meaning of Thanksgiving, discuss Native land issues, and explain how we can help. I'm going to introduce them in just a moment, right after I tell you about a few upcoming events. While many of these events are local in Colorado, we are a national group. Many activists and group leaders from outside Colorado are part of Solidarity Warriors because we teach skills like organizing, and we have speakers on topics that are applicable no matter where you live. If you'd like to become an official member, you can do that using the link here in the chat. Oh, never mind. I will get you guys that link later. Members do get benefits like a one-on-one Zoom meeting with myself or one of our other co-leaders, a free Solidarity Wear t-shirt, and more. So definitely check that out when I send that link here in a minute. So here are the upcoming events. The mass blackout started yesterday. Remember, if you need to buy something, please use local businesses, especially Native-owned businesses. You can find them by searching for Native-owned businesses and the name of your city. Here's a link to some here in Colorado. And right now, over 2,000 Starbucks baristas are still on strike until Starbucks finalizes a union contract that guarantees the pay, hours, and staffing employees need to succeed. If you're a Starbucks drinker, you might have noticed workers picketing outside. And even if you don't see them, there is a virtual picket line around every Starbucks in the country. Our name, Solidarity Warriors, comes from the labor movement and to my connections with it, which started when I was just 16 years old. Other workers and I attempted to form a union at the call center I worked at, but it failed because of intimidation from management. Starbucks has used historic union busting tactics, yet baristas from 95 stores across 65 cities are still standing strong. So don't cross that picket line. Don't buy holiday gift cards. There's more info and a pledge you can sign at the link in the chat. I didn't find a donate button, but they do have a merch store to support the movement. The Colorado Bridge Trolls organize several overpass protests and other events every week. Later on tonight, I'll put their schedule in the chat, and it'll also be in our email. There's a very important protest against key lime air coming up next week, and Dana from the Denver Immigrant Partnership team is going to tell us some more about it. Dana?
Hi, everybody. Yes. So for those of you who may not know, Key Lime is a Colorado-based airline that contracts with ICE to transport detainees. Also, the University of Colorado contracts with Key Lime for their athletic teams. And so we are putting pressure on both Key Lime and on CU for them to stop this contract with ICE. There is a protest next week, the 4th, on the campus of CU. The student group, the Democratic Socialists of America student group, are putting together a protest next week. And also, we're in contact with the regents and with we're actually also very much concerned about the safety on board flights that are chartered by ICE. For example, how do people evacuate an airplane full of shackled passengers? So I'm in talking to the National Association of Flight Attendants to figure out if we can use that angle to muck up everything for Key Lime. So we'd love to have you all sign a petition. We want to get a few thousand signatures on it so that by December 20th, we're going to have a simultaneous protest in different cities because Key Lime's has a subsidiary called Denver Air Connection. They fly to places like Alamosa and Pueblo and McCook, Nebraska, and different places. So we're going to have protests at each one of those cities, protesting Denver Air Connection and Key Lime. So there's a lot going on with that. Please sign the protest. And if anybody needs any more information, feel free to email me and I can give you all the information that you need. And that's at pompomdana@gmail.com, pompomdana@gmail.com. Tiffany, thank you for letting me speak real quickly about the key lime situation. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dana,
You're
we have
welcome.
one question.
Oh, sure.
Is the CU protest going to be in Denver or Boulder?
It's going to be on the Boulder campus. In fact, I will post the graphic.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I just posted the Colorado Bridge Trolls. So this next graphic is going to be the protest that Dana will post. All right. So Solidarity Warriors, we are going to host a holiday party on December 13th at 2 p.m. It will be in or near Denver, and we would love it if you would all join us. We'll have more details on this event next week, but now I'd like to introduce our guests, and please forgive me if I mispronounce anything. Storyteller at heart, Raven Payment. Ani Shinabe is a veteran of the U.S. Navy serving in operations enduring in Iraqi freedom, a member of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Task Force of Colorado, a former court-appointed special advocate for children in the child welfare system, and the former co-chair of the Denver American Indian Commission. Raven was part of the core group of the Indigenous community members that passed Colorado Senate Bills 22-150 and 23-054, which established and enhanced the Office of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. This legislation established one of the first permanent offices in the nation focused on addressing the crisis of MMIR and made Colorado the third state to establish a missing Indigenous person alert. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce all three of our guests, and then you guys can take over. Wasu Duda is a treaty Indian. He is Bidua Kantuan Dakota Santee Sioux and is a treaty advocate. His people are from Minnesota, and he is a lineal descendant of the Dakota Oyate. He promotes land back and supports AIM, the American Indian Movement, and other groups opposing what's going on today. He does not like Native haters and genocidal racism against Natives. Tyler Crazybear is Oglala and Hunkpapa Lakota from U.S. Prison Camp number 334, Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Relocating to Colorado at the age of 5 years old, he went to school in Thornton and is a CU graduate. He started Rise and Represent 9 months ago to show Native representation at rallies and protests at the Denver Capitol. R&R has grown to be one of the leading voices in Native American rights and freedoms, bringing to light issues affecting Natives in Colorado and throughout Indian country, and bringing awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people crisis going on throughout America. R&R supports the fight for human rights and the organizations that are fighting to free this country from this bullshit government. It's a good day to disobey and to rise and represent. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guests.
Hey, how y'all doing out there? I'm Tyler Crazybear. Glad y'all tuned in. The people that are going to be speaking are phenomenal. They're going to shine some light on the true holiday of Thanksgiving, where it came from, the not so pretty part and not so great part of Thanksgiving. And then I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about more Indigenous and Native American issues that are going on here in Colorado, good and bad. There's a lot of good that's going on with the Native American community. it's going to be a good one, I believe. So I'm glad you all joined in, and I just want to say hello. Raven, Otto, go ahead. Y'all would like to say something?
Bonjour and Danawe Maganaguk, everybody. Hello, all of my relatives. Obviously, I'm Raven Payment. I am Anishinaabe. My ancestors come from what is now the Keweenaw Indian community and the Sault Ste. Marie Band of Chippewa Indians along Lake Superior in Michigan. So it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me, and I hope to have some good discussion points tonight.
All right. Let's see. Got our other speaker available? Ha. I don't know if he was able to tune in. He was trying to get in earlier. Well, I guess I will start then. Um, some of the stuff that happened when the Pilgrims showed up, the settlers, was really, really covered up in the history books. All of us learned as we got older, and as so forth, we kept believing that there was such a peaceful meeting between the Native Americans and with the Pilgrims, and everybody sat down, had this beautiful dinner. The truth to that is when the Pilgrims and settlers came in, there was a mass genocide. In 1637, there was a battle, a war against the Native American community or Native American tribes on the East Coast. The Pequot tribe was pretty much wiped out. Settlers took over their land, totally, pretty much annihilated them. In 1630, there was a very big wars of the Pequot War, where they were pretty much annihilated, taken out, and the governor, which is John Winthrop, at that time, declared Thanksgiving a dinner celebration for the annihilation and removal of Native Americans. When they sat down, they hung bodies, they hung heads out for display, and they were looked at as sort of a trophy that they had conquered that land there. So when you look at the history books, the way that it was covered up is one big lie, one big super lie. The kids today, now in school, they don't hear about it either. It's time for us to all come together and actually realize what this is about. Speak about it. Tell your relatives about it. Tell them to look it up. It's all documented. George Washington was the one who declared it or proclaimed Thanksgiving to be a public and national holiday, still knowing what it was for. It was, it's a genocidal holiday, and we don't really. Well, I can't say we because I can't speak for all natives, but myself, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. We had our dinner last night, and that was a dinner of honor and remembrance. It's not a dinner to celebrate any type of fake holiday. We celebrate and eat and have a family gathering and remember all the natives that were taken away from us in the beginning. And I mean, it's terrible. It's not something that the United States is happy about. It's not something they want to talk about. It's not anything that is going to be on your history channels and on your TV during Thanksgiving. They don't want to ruin the holiday, and I don't want to ruin the holiday either for people. But it would be nice if when you sat down to dinner that you did remember the Indians and the natives on the East Coast that first met these pilgrims that were slaughtered, that were just, it was horrible. The women, the children, the ones that did survive were put into slavery. It was nothing nice. It's hard for me to talk about without really tearing up about it because it's still just thinking about what they went through and how it's glorified in the United States. And it's not right. It's definitely not right. Um, right now we still have a genocide going on. We have tons of missing indigenous women, children, men, two-spirit. That's one thing people don't talk about, our two-spirits, our two-spirit community, and it's affected them a lot too. You don't hear about it in the news. You don't hear about it. Even on TikTok, you don't hear about it. And usually you hear everything on TikTok. I mean, it's become a problem, and it's not getting publicized. People don't talk about it. People don't bring it up. Emily Pike was what was sort of a turning point to where it did get into the national news, but look how quick it faded. There's no more marches, there's no more awareness. It's just sort of got put on the back burner, and it hurts to see that. And the more people out there that can realize that it's going on and it is a genocide, when people are getting taken away from you, your culture is getting taken away from you, people are dying, and it's not getting put out there. It's sort of accepted in a way. And I don't know if that's the way that America looks at it, but that's the way, as a Native American man and as a Native warrior, that's the way I look at it, that people are pushing it all to the back. They don't want to hear about it. And this might sound a little, not can say a little on the racist side. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be whatsoever. But when you have a blonde-haired white girl that gets murdered or something happens to them, the first thing you hear about is on CNN or any of those. They talk about it. They launch an investigation. They have all this stuff, and then like 6 months later, they have a recap on it. It's just not. It's just not right. It really isn't right. Raven has really, really brought a lot of stuff to light and fought for MMIW awareness and rights. I'm proud to stand next to her at any rally, any protest. Just to be in her presence is an honor. You know, I just wish people would put it out there this holiday and pray for the ones that are missing, the ones that are gone, and the ones that have been taken from us. And that's just one of the things I wanted to get across. And one more thing I would love to put out there: if everybody could keep a family in your prayers tonight. There's 3 children that were taken away from us and a father. And if I could get the community to come together, just say a prayer for them, give them your blessings, and hug your loved ones. Let them know you're not gonna, you never know when they're gonna be gone. But if we, at some point tomorrow, tonight, everybody can say a prayer. That would be nice. Well, that's enough right now. I'm starting to get emotional. I'm gonna hand it over to Raven. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. I'll talk to y'all here in a minute. We'll have some questions and we'll answer whatever. So I'll let Raven take over for now.
Thanks, Tyler. Right when I started crying. Before I start, the family that Tyler is talking about is in regards to the crash, the fatalities that happened in Douglas County the night before last. 2 children from a Yankton, Dakota family, Toretto Cortado, who was 8 years old, and his sister McKinley Cortado, who I believe was 12, were killed in that crash, along with their stepbrother, Jace Green. Their father, Alvin Cortado, was also killed in that crash. And then the 2 other siblings are currently in ICU. Their mother is a friend of mine, and these were my nieces and nephews. So if you hold space for their healing and journeys, that would be super great. So without further ado, I'm gonna take a deep breath and dive into this. I work in corporate America by day, so I actually came with a PowerPoint because that's just who I am as a person, and I think I can maybe share, maybe not.
You should be able to.
Cool.
Sometimes it's under more if it's not showing up as a green button.
We're just gonna share my desktop, and I'm gonna go right into the PowerPoint. And we are gonna jump right in. Can everybody see a nice little fun meme? All
Yes.
right. Okay. So where I want to start with is just grounding us in the truth that Indigenous people are still here, obviously. Our nations continue, our families continue, our fight to protect our survival continues. But when we talk about Thanksgiving, and I like to call it Thanks-taking, but we're talking about a national story that claims to honor gratitude while the land beneath our feet carries a memory of genocide, erasure, but also resistance. To set this intention clearly, my talk today is not about attacking anyone's family gathering. I'm here to confront a holiday that protects a myth and its truth telling in the face of a narrative that has been created to make settlers feel innocent. And from the beginning, I just want to challenge everyone with one simple question. What are you actually celebrating? Um, this isn't the story you grew up in. There's no version, or you're coming with a version that's been sanitized for comfort. When you participate in a holiday like Thanksgiving, even when you want to create it and say it's about gratitude and family, what are you celebrating at its core? As I talk, I'm going to pose questions, and I hope that it will guide your thought process. So when you leave this space, you carry these questions with you. You let them guide you, and you let them interrupt the stories that you've been given, and therefore you can go and disrupt the stories that other people are continuing to perpetuate. First is just the myth of the first Thanksgiving. Tyler touched upon it pretty succinctly, so I'll just kind of gloss over some of it. But we know the classroom version. There were pilgrims, there were friendly Indians, and a peaceful feast that supposedly symbolized cooperation. And hopefully, most people know now that that version is a fairy tale. Before the Mayflower came over, European ships had already spread disease that killed most of the indigenous population along the coast. The Wampanoag people, for example, had been devastated. Some had already been kidnapped and brought across the ocean. And then that so-called first Thanksgiving was not born out of friendship. This emerged out of survival, fear, and political necessity in the face of catastrophe. So one of the questions I want to ask is, if the story you were taught is false, then what are you actually celebrating? If the foundation of the holiday is a lie, then what does that lie protect? There was a period of violence that followed for the next couple hundred years. The brief period of cooperation collapsed quickly. As soon as the settler population grew, they seized land, they violated agreements, and they passed laws that restricted indigenous autonomy. They destroyed food systems, imposed their religion, and they expanded without limit. In 1637, like Tyler was talking about, at Fort Mystic in what is now known as Connecticut, European settlers, and I like to call them invaders normally, but we'll continue to use settlers for the purposes of this conversation. They surrounded a Pequot village, they set it on fire, and they murdered entire families while they fled. The colonial governor then declared a Thanksgiving to celebrate that massacre. By the time of King Philip's War, thousands of indigenous people had been killed or enslaved, and this is the world that Thanksgiving that we know today emerged from. There was no peace, there was no harmony, there was no mutual respect. The next couple of hundred years that follow, I always like to talk about how did we get here. I like to joke about, I don't call him Christopher Columbus, I call him Bitch-defer Columbus, but he came over in 1492, and then in 1493, Inter Cetera, the Doctrine of Discovery, was issued as a papal bull. It authored Christian powers to seize non-Christian lands and subjugate barbarous people, aka all the people that were living on what we call Turtle Island. This policy has been the basis for most US policies to date, and I'll get to that here in a minute. I mean, even the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, it's one big long letter of we the people, we hate King George. And then in the very end, it's everyone is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, except for merciless Indian savages. Even our founding documents still contain a racial slur and demean our entire population of people. When I was talking about manifest destiny, though, for example, RBG is often held as a paragon of virtue and feminism. However, RBG actually upheld lands being denied to the Oneida people in Oneida versus Sherrill in 2005 and cited the doctrine of discovery as the basis to do that, to say that Indigenous people did not have a right to their land anymore. Nothing is black and white. When we get into further policies, everything is erasure by design. You have the Indian Removal Act, the Homestead Act, and the Evans Proclamation. I saw somebody mentioned in the chat that we're coming up on the memorial of the Sand Creek Massacre. The Evans Proclamation was issued in March of 1864 by Governor Evans, and that is why Mount Evans is now known as Mount Blue Sky. And that proclamation paved the way for the Sand Creek Massacre to happen in November of 1864. Going into 1860 until 1996, I was only 14 years old. You had the boarding school era in which Native children were removed from their families and assimilated through violent means to lose their culture, their language, and their identities. 1883 saw a ban on Native cultures. They called it the Code of Indian Offenses. That actually wasn't overturned until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. The Dawes Act was land allotment and also assimilation. That's where you started getting a lot of the reservations. 1953 was the termination policy in which the United States government targeted tribal sovereignty. And then you had 1956 was the Relocation Act. So Denver is one of 7 cities in the United States that participated in the Indian Relocation Act. 31,000 natives were taken from their reservations and brought to urban centers. Well, they were brought to Denver in this case, with the hopes of job opportunity and urban assimilation. What really happened was most of those jobs only lasted a few months and didn't have long-term potential. And then you had a lot of people who were stuck here and couldn't get back to their homelands. The idea, though, was a long-term policy that natives would lose ties to their culture and their land, thereby later opening those lands up and again undermining tribal sovereignty. Historic frameworks, modern consequences. This is just kind of showing you when a lot of these policies were overturned and how they still impact us today. When I was talking about that Evans Proclamation of 1864, that proclamation stated that it was legal to kill natives and take their property in the state of Colorado. That law was not overturned until August of 2021. And I will say that Governor Polis had to be cornered at an event at the Indian Center to actually understand that he needed to reverse that policy and make it right. Again, when Tyler was talking about missing and murdered Indigenous people, we use the term relatives just to be inclusive of gender binary. Non-Native perpetrators of violence on reservations, they could not be prosecuted until 2013 with the Violence Against Women Act. That means that men used to target Native people on reservations for violence and sexual assault, and then would flee the reservation knowing that they would never be held accountable for their crimes. Essentially, where I'm going with that is that all of these policies, centuries of dehumanization and policies to erase us, lead to violence. And when we do succumb to violence, we are less likely to be aided, looked for, or advocated for justice. So something else I wanted to talk about with Thanksgiving is this overconsumption and materialism. Thanksgiving marks the beginning of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It's hyperconsumption. Billions of dollars are spent, material goods that people usually don't need. Personally, I think it soothes emotional emptiness rather than addressing structural harm, and capitalism thrives and depends on this cycle. I have a hard time that people call this time of year gratitude when this entire system and holiday is designed to distract them from the truth that the land that produces this food and this wealth and this comfort is stolen. Widespread spending, Americans will spend on average $160 per person for holiday season items, which include gifts, food, decorations, seasonal purchases. The 5-day stretch from Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday, spending usually goes around 127 billion. 187 million people will shop during that period, reinforcing how the holiday has become inseparable from consumer demand. Shopping urges are not benign. They're driven not by a genuine need, but by social pressure. It feeds directly into waste, debt, and an unsustainable lifestyle that treats consumption as identity. This is directly counterintuitive to Indigenous principles traditionally and currently. The result of all of this, though, is a celebration of excess, and it's built on buying more than you need, more food, more stuff, more waste. It upholds a tradition of consumption without ever reflecting on what abundance really means, who benefits from it, and which systems are supported when everyone piles into the mall. When you combine this pattern of spending with the waste generated from massive food preparation, leftover disposal, and over-ordering, you get a picture of a holiday and a day that is less about gratitude and more reinforcing a culture of take, consume, discard. And this is a culture that mirrors the same extractive logic that underpins colonialism. Take as much as you can, use what benefits you, discard the rest, and then keep moving forward, no matter who you step on along the way. So a question here is your celebration about giving and connection, or does it fuel a machine that normalizes overconsumption at the cost of land, labor, and respect? Are you honoring abundance, or are you honoring a system that treats land, food, and energy as disposable because Indigenous teachings about reciprocity have been erased? I skipped way ahead, but you get to see my mascot pictures because that's going to be a fun one. But also talking about food waste and environmental harm. Thanksgiving starts with a meal that's framed as abundance, but in practice, it's overproduction and waste. Every Thanksgiving, our country wastes an estimated 320 million pounds of food on one day, $550 million in food. 267 million meals are discarded, while millions of families in this country will experience food insecurity. We're fed this narrative that abundance is love, but to me, and in Indigenous principles, abundance without responsibility is gluttony. Again, it mirrors the same extractive mindset: take more than you need, claim more than you can use. So are we really celebrating gratitude and abundance, or are we celebrating a culture of excess? Does gratitude look like 320 million pounds of wasted food? So talking about the intersection of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, there's a number of staggering statistics here. I could talk ad nauseum all day about what's going on locally in Colorado as well. But the crisis of MMIR is a predictable outcome of the same colonial systems that Thanksgiving has been designed to disguise. It's one of the clearest examples of how violence of the past is alive in the present, and it exists because the United States is built on a legal structure that makes Indigenous people easier to harm and harder to protect. This system began with colonial violence and continues through modern policy and traditions like Thanksgiving. And that's why this holiday is not neutral. It celebrates a sanitized story of harmony while our communities, Indigenous communities, live with an ongoing crisis of loss, silence, and government neglect. Our families are told to be grateful, and we're told to heal quietly, and we're told to celebrate while our families are still searching for their missing loved ones and advocating for justice. Can a holiday rooted in the erasure of Indigenous people ever be separated from the modern systems that allow us to disappear without consequence? So talking about contemporary intersections of harm, Thanksgiving continues to reinforce and normalize harm in the present through everyday practices that most people don't ever think to question. The violence and erasure that shaped the early history of this country still show up in these symbols and rituals and entertainment that define this holiday season and the consumption of entertainment, specifically with sports, that continue throughout the year. These intersections seem cultural, but they have real consequences. They shape perception and public policy and who gets protected and who gets forgotten. One of the examples here is professional football. There's always big games on Thanksgiving. It used to be the Cowboys versus what I call the Slurskins, who are now the Washington Commanders. Now they have moved to the Cowboys and the Chiefs. And this pairing is not accidental. This is cultural programming. It's a repetition of a story of conquest, dominance, and entertainment built on a myth of harmony. The Dallas Cowboys have always played on Thanksgiving, and you have this inference of the archetype of the American settler. It's the cowboy, it's the frontier myth, cowboys versus Indians, and our country celebrates this without reflection. Adding the Chiefs to this mix, it makes the symbolism even more explicit. You have fans that show up with their faces painted. They have these headdresses. Ironically, the NFL puts end racism in the end zone, which just blows my mind every year. And then they do the stereotypical tomahawk chop and the oh yo yo, and they have a big drum. This sound infuriates me anytime I hear it, regardless of if it's on Thanksgiving or not. But these actions are not harmless. They're a part of a larger cultural system that reduces Indigenous people to caricatures and mascots. Research has shown that Native mascots and stereotypes in sports are directly linked to harm. In 2021, I actually worked on the Senate bill to prohibit Native mascots in the state of Colorado. And in 2019, I worked on a similar bill. I grew up in Maine initially. We worked on the first bill in the country to prohibit Native mascots in high schools or in public school sports there as well. Those battles were probably some of the most racist fights of my life, the things that people would say to defend their Native mascots. The American Psychological Association has found that exposure to this type of imagery lowers the self-esteem in Native youth. It reduces their self-worth, and it also increases bias among non-Native participants when they're seeing and participating in this behavior. The more alarming, though, study that is found is that Native mascots contribute to a public perception that we are historical rather than contemporary. This reduces support for our tribal sovereignty, but it also increases public indifference to violence against Indigenous people. This is the consequence. These are just flyers, and this is just a small fraction of MMIR in the state of Colorado. These are missing people and unsolved homicides. So what I really wanted to talk about today was Thanksgiving and the hypocrisy of immigration narratives in the United States. Thanksgiving is framed as a story of welcoming of newcomers that arrived on the shorelines and were just embraced by the people whose land they were entering. The descendants of those same European invaders who crossed an ocean with no permission, no documents, and no intention of respecting Indigenous sovereignty now call Indigenous people from the South illegal, and it's a fucking contradiction. The first immigrants to this land were not Indigenous people crossing an invisible line. The first immigrants were obviously Europeans who arrived without consent or regard for the people who were already here. They had no respect for the laws, cultures, or boundaries of the nations they invaded. And not only did they refuse to leave, but they claimed ownership over everything they touched. The border between the United States and Mexico is not ancient, nor is it indigenous. It is a colonial line drawn on stolen land. And that is the real irony of Thanksgiving, that a holiday that celebrates the arrival of people who refuse to respect native boundaries, those descendants now weaponize a border like drawn by conquest to criminalize Indigenous people from the South. People whose cultures predate the idea of America entirely and whose nations existed long before the United States stole their land and declared them foreigners on it. Some of these same Indigenous people are fleeing violence created by the United States itself. Our interventions, our policies, our corporations, US-backed conflicts. Others are fleeing climate impacts caused largely by wealthy nations, wealthy companies in our company, mostly the United States. So when people gather to celebrate Thanksgiving and claim to honor the story of newcomers in need of receiving kindness, where is that kindness for Indigenous migrants now? Why is the story only invoked when white settlers are the newcomers? Why do we see European arrival as destiny, but Indigenous arrival as a threat? And this debate in the United States about immigration is still built on a fundamental lie that the United States has the moral authority to decide who belongs on Indigenous land, and that this land belongs to the descendants of settlers rather than the nations they displaced. It is a lie that Indigenous people from the South are foreign to a continent their ancestors have lived on since time immemorial. If the descendants of European Christian invaders can cross an ocean without permission and declare themselves the rightful owners of a continent, then no Indigenous person from the South can ever be illegal on this land. This has always been a conversation about who gets criminalized for movement and who gets rewarded for invasion. So kind of wrapping this up and some of the questions that I want people to take away from the myriad of questions I've already tossed at you, though, is I see this said by the majority every year, and people say that they know the real story now and that their Thanksgiving is different. They say that their holiday and celebration is about gratitude and family, and it's not about pilgrims and Indians. And they say that intention is enough. So I go back to that first question that I asked you is what are you really celebrating? Not what you tell your children, not the softened, polite version that is repeated. When you sit down and turn on the football game, when you participate in a national holiday born inside of a violent system, what are you actually celebrating? Are you celebrating a myth that was invented to hide genocide? Are you celebrating comfort that comes from forgetting? Are you celebrating an illusion of innocence that Thanksgiving is designed to protect? And celebrating the fact that you get to live in a country built on stolen land, stolen labor, and stolen lives. And then you say that you're grateful for the benefits that you receive. The next big question I have is, are you undoing the legacy of colonialism by revising your celebration to be about gratitude? If you change the symbolism but keep the structure, are you undoing anything at all? If you paint over the violence with the language of gratitude, does the harm disappear? If your celebration depends on ignoring Indigenous grief, is it decolonized? Colonialism is not a story from the 1600s, 1700s, 1500s. It is a living system that still shapes every part of this country and our society and all of us who are connected to each other right now. Changing the meaning of this celebration does not undo that system. So as we gather this year, I am assuming a lot of us have tomorrow off, depending on what industries that we're in. I hope that these questions sit with you. I hope they sit at your dinner tables tomorrow and going forward. And I hope this sparks a conversation for change with what are you actually celebrating and who benefits from the answer that you give yourself. These questions, these things I've said are not meant to ruin your holiday or your dinner table, but it's meant to reveal whether you are participating in a lie or if you are willing to confront the truth. So, Chi-Miigwech, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and I'm going to be quiet. It's all yours, Tyler.
Wow, that was amazing. All I gotta say. Yo, Basu, you on, brother? Hello,
No, he
Pola.
said in the chat that he had to leave.
Oh, well, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. Well, if y'all have any questions, I mean, believe me, I don't know how I'm gonna follow that up. Geez, Louise, I'm not a very good speaker. Not at all, really. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if we can answer them for you or anything like that, that would be awesome.
I've been keeping track of the questions in a list. So if anybody has questions, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat, and we will go from there. The first question is, I want to be more involved. I'm trying to save our traditions. What can people do to help?
Hmm. When it comes to like with what we do, with the protesting and the rallies and so forth like that. When it comes to tradition, we try to keep the tradition, as much as we can. It's a little outside of our tradition in a way, with what we're doing. And I mean, like, but when it comes to helping, I mean, like, coming out, showing your support. If we have any type of event coming up, just attending, going to powwows, going to Native American markets, um, visiting like Orr's Trading Post up on Kipling and Colfax. That very good at Native American owned business, like Rosie's Rack, which is a Native American thrift store, and she does all sorts of stuff for the community. Teaches ribbon skirt making. She does ribbon shirts, beading. They have a drum group there every Wednesday that teaches songs and traditional blessings and so forth. The Denver Indian Center is a great place to go to reach out to find people that will help you find your traditions and teach you the ways. Um, it's really good. On Thursday nights and on Tuesday nights, they have a community night, and everybody's welcome, indigenous or not. They're welcome. They have a little dinner afterwards. They have a talking circle. They do beadwork. They teach Native American dancing. They have a lot of good stuff that goes on Tuesdays, Thursdays. There's the Lakota Church, which is a good place to learn your spiritual side and to learn ceremony. Four Winds Church is another place where you could really reach out to community, to spiritual leaders, and to community leaders there that can definitely, point you in the ways to go to reconnect. Like with me, I'm a city Indian, and it's a little hard for me to say that I'm traditional because I'm way far from traditional. I'm still learning my traditions. I'm still learning my prayers, my songs. I'm learning all that. It's all sort of new to me because every day I learn something new. So it's just continuously growing and learning about my traditions and my ways and trying to pass those on, the stories, the teachings. Our teachings, aren't like you would see in a book where you grab a book and it's all written, or somebody stands in a classroom and tells you everything about it. Our teachings come from stories, and the stories, if you listen to them, they help guide you through life. They help you become a better person. They teach you how to deal with certain situations. So just going out and speaking with elders and speaking with the older generation, they're the ones who hold the knowledge, really. You can't learn the knowledge all on your own out of a book or off YouTube. I mean, like, there's some good little things on YouTube, but you don't know who you're listening to. You don't know who that person really is. You haven't connected with them. So I would say if you really want to get out there and learn your tradition and learn your ceremonies, your ways, and your people, you got to go out and not be scared to ask elders and ask people. A lot of people are very willing to answer those questions and teach you those traditions because gatekeepers, that's what we call them, the people who hold their traditions, and their stories and everything for themselves and this and that. I don't know, that's I don't look upon that as something that should be done. I think you should tell your stories and your teachings to all the young, even to newcomers, that are trying to reconnect, and it helps you grow as well. So yeah, that's all that's the way that I would reach out and help the community and get more connected.
Great. So the next question, Raven, you touched on it. The anniversary of Sand Creek is in 3 days. Jerry, did you want to say something about it? You said ask me about it.
Yeah, I did a movie, or helped make a movie about the Sand Creek Massacre. It was called The Soul of Silas, and it's a documentary. And I think everybody should watch that because it's Colorado history. It's Cheyenne and Arapaho people that were massacred so that Colorado could become a state. It's really important. I go there every year. I'm really proud of making Soul of Silas because it documented the horrors of what really happened there and what every single one of you in Colorado is standing on is the deaths of people at Sand Creek. I'm pretty vocal about it. I'm also an activist, and there's some people I'm working with Working Families Party that are trying to save our combined heritage and stuff. Some elected people, we're going to work on it down here in Pueblo, but we're going to get it going. Sorry, I'm stumbling again.
Silas Soul he is honored every year. His gravesite is in the metro area. So he actually testified against the cavalry that led the charge that massacred all those people, and he ended up being assassinated for it, for his trouble. Um, One of the things a lot of people don't know is that John Shivington was the leader that led that charge. They initially used to call it a battle. He was a terrible man. Also married his daughter-in-law later on and then abandoned her. Irrelevant. But he is buried in Denver. He is actually buried in Fairmount. So I usually stop by every so often just to flip him off and spit on his grave.
Oh, that's good.
Um, so I wanted to follow that up by saying thank you both for being here. I think this is information that people can't get and don't get elsewhere. And I think that having you here helps me be a better person knowing this information and you know just telling the truth about the way things really are. So thank you for being here, and I will keep at. Oh, go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you both so much for being here as well. My family's upstairs hanging out right now, and we're planning dinner tomorrow. But before we have dinner, we're going to watch the recording of this meeting. So I thank you so much for giving me this that I can share with them.
By the way, Tiffany, one of the questions is when is this recording going to be up? Because people want to show it to their family tomorrow.
Yeah, so I put that link to our YouTube channel in the chat. It will be up by noon tomorrow. So look for it. I'll drop that link again.
If that's it, the next question I have is, can you tell us when or how the original meaning of Thanksgiving was whitewashed to the story that we've been fed now?
You want to take this one?
I was looking at you. I don't know if you can tell that. It was really funny. I knew that question was going to be asked. Tyler, you did kind of touch upon it a little bit. There was a push with George Washington initially, but they called it something different. But it was actually Abraham Lincoln, following the Civil War. I am an armchair historian. I do not have a degree in history, so people feel free to correct me as I'm going through this. But in any case, it was Lincoln who needed to unify the country following the Civil War. Also, I dated a guy from the South once, and his stepfather corrected me and was like, "It was the War of Northern Aggression." And I always think of that when I say the Civil War and cackle on the inside. In any case, irrelevant. Lincoln wanted to unify the country, so they established like the initial Thanksgiving, to have this big gratitude. Everyone's going to shake hands and get along, and the rest of the stories with like Squanto and stuff kind of like came later, but it initially started with that push from Lincoln with trying to unify post Civil War. So that is the Ravenism version. I'm sure someone with a degree can do a much better job at explaining that.
I mean, I think the whole thing was crap from the beginning, but that's a little different. The
I
next
will
question.
before we go to the next question. I will also point out that Lincoln is responsible for the largest mass execution in United States history, where he hanged 38 Dakota men, for basically defending their right to eat because the government was on holding up their end of the bargain with the rations. So Lincoln can get some smoke too.
Yep, 100%. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Morgan. My bad.
Well, I'm getting sidetracked too. On the subject of history, my daughter did a mock trial for Andrew Jackson to impeach him. And if you want to talk about bad people, he goes top of the underrated list. But the next question is, are there any native groups in the Fort Collins area? And I will expand it to Pueblo as well. Like, are there resources we can direct people to in those areas?
What's the name of Christiana's group up there, in Fort Collins? They led that, when they were going after CSU for that building back.
Oh,
She's
man,
Lakota.
I
E,
can't remember the organization or the group.
if I can find it.
If you guys can find it, we will send it out in our follow-up email
Okay.
and pass it on to people. So,
We'll send out around the middle of the day tomorrow.
And
Okay.
Pueblo has a group down there that's been going after that Columbus statue. I know they partner with the Brown Berets a lot down there. I'm trying to remember the name of the group though. Shayla Lujan, I think, is one of the organizers in Pueblo that kind of leads the charge down there. They've been really trying hard for that Columbus statue for a long time.
Yeah.
okay. I hope that's useful. Raven, I was at the last No Kings when you gave your speech, but I wasn't able to see the video until much later because I was further down. So I know at least a little bit about how you're going to answer this question. But do you think land acknowledgement statements are performative or useful?
Okay. Yes and no. Tyler has heard me rant about this. So land acknowledgements came from a place of good intention, and I think we all know the saying good intention. So to me, a typical land acknowledgement is basically like if I come and I steal your purse and you say, "Oh my God, you stole my purse," and I just say, "I acknowledge that," and I keep walking. That does nothing to repair the harm or return your belongings. So a lot of land acknowledgements to me are performative and hollow, and they allow the harm to continue. A land acknowledgement without action is completely performative. So if you're going to do a land acknowledgement, there should be a commitment behind that, whether it's I'm going to make a donation to a Native organization or perhaps a tribe in the area, or maybe you're going to commit time to working with a Native group, or you're going to donate to a Native organization, or maybe you're going to give some land back. I don't know. Like it needs to be followed up with an action that is beneficial to Indigenous people. Not just I acknowledge that I'm on your land and I'm going to do fuck all about it. Tyler, I don't know if you have additional or different thoughts about that.
No, a land acknowledgement to me as being a native, I don't, I look at it as why should we be acknowledging the land that we're already on? That's our land. We don't need to acknowledge that land. And you said like at No Kings, that's pretty much, the gist of it right there. That I think that when you're doing a land acknowledgement as a Native American, you should be doing that in ceremony. That's blessing the land for ceremony. I don't believe that a land acknowledgement is something that should be performed lightly. And it is sort of theatrical in a way with a lot of ways that it's done. And it shouldn't be done that way. It's to us, or well, to me, a land acknowledgement is a ceremony. It's blessing the land that we're going to be either dancing on, we're going to be drumming on, or that we're going to be performing, you know, any type of like a pipe ceremony or something. I don't know if Native Americans should really be doing land acknowledgements in the sense of, you know, pleasing somebody, or pleasing the organization or the people. I think that it's a private thing in a way when it comes to Native Americans. But yeah, that's how I feel on that way with the land acknowledgement. It should be a blessing the land that you're on and performing a ceremony or, doing something in a good way. Which don't get me wrong, what we were doing at No Kings was in a very good way. It was awesome. You know, it was great. I thought that whole thing was just it blew my mind how many people showed up, how many people were active. It was just made my heart happy to see that. But yeah, that's how I look at land acknowledgements and so forth.
So I will follow that up. Raven, you said a land acknowledgement without action is performative, and I agree with that. And I think the action needs to be behind it. Is this something that you would request stop? Is this a practice that doesn't make sense to do anymore? Or is there something that would be more appropriate and less performative?
I don't Personally, and I just a caveat for the group, like we're not a monolith. I didn't say that in the presentation. Like we all have very differing opinions, Native people. So just to be clear, like I only speak for myself. Personally, I don't necessarily think they should be stopped. I think it at bare minimum, it is a good starting point as a reminder that we're still here. Um, that said, the challenge is, bringing, undoing all this whitewashed propaganda, to get a good land acknowledgement, to get action behind that isn't performative. Instead of like DUs, for example, ironically, they're the pioneers, whatever. Like their land acknowledgement is like live, laugh, love land acknowledgement. There's like nothing behind it. So I personally wouldn't want to see them stopped. But again, it's not, as Tyler said, our responsibility to acknowledge our own land. And then secondly, challenging people to put action behind their words and their acknowledgements.
What are some things that, what are some organizations that Colorado groups can donate to take that action, or like what other actions should we be encouraging groups to take?
Sure. I think you shared that Colorado Proud earlier that had like the native organizations. So there's a lot of like really cool native businesses. Tyler talked about a lot of them too. We have like our nonprofits like Four Winds American Indian Council. You have Denver Indian Family Health Services, which provides healthcare to natives along the Denver metro area. One of the things that people might not be aware, for example, so there's two sovereign nations in Colorado that have reservations, but they're like 7 hours away from the Denver Front Range. 80% of Native people don't live on reservations. So they're like Tyler and I, we live across the Front Range. There's 206,000 per the last census that live kind of in that metro area. So then you have like Denver Indian Family Resource Center that we call DIFRAC. You have the Denver Indian Center. I run the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Task Force. We're a nonprofit. There's another nonprofit called Native Love that's kind of in that Four Corners area. I know I'm just firing things, but these are just kind of some of the nonprofits that, give services and resources to like urban natives that aren't tied to sovereign nations like the two Ute communities down in the southwest corner. And
And for every
it is the norm in Canada. Sorry, I just saw a comment. They call them treaty acknowledgements up there. I'm working on a job in Winnipeg and they start every meeting in corporate Canada with a treaty acknowledgement. It's awkward.
I imagine that would
um,
be awkward. Um,
and I'll send everybody a list of the organizations that Raven just went over in the email tomorrow.
I'm gonna ask two questions because they're kind of combined. Um, my question is, people have heard me say this before. My goal is to remove this regime from power. And I don't think there's an electoral way to do it. And I think enough harm has been done that there's going to need to be a rebuilding afterwards. One of the things I am deeply conflicted about is if that does come about, how do we how do we resolve what has happened with Native Americans in a way that is that makes it better with the fact that there are 330 million people here we can't eject and give all the land back. And combined with that, the other question that's related is the indigenous people have been present at each of the No Kings events. So given our history, America's story, when do we take down this horrific Trump regime? What changes for the indigenous people? And will anyone from the FBI to Congress to the other branches do anything differently regarding the horrors of missing children and others?
Hmm. Well, you know, the first of the like going to the first part there, yeah, that's sort of a tough one when you think about it. What would change or what would help? I guess you were saying like what could we do that would change with the Trump regime, getting him out and so forth. I mean, the one thing that we would get with getting rid of him would be getting rid of ICE. We have a huge problem on Navajo reservations in South Dakota and on Standing Rock and Pine Ridge, Rapid City, South Dakota. They're targeting Native Americans in Rapid City, South Dakota. You know, stuff like that. And then having to worry about our health care as Native Americans. In the treaties, we were given healthcare, the right for healthcare, right for education, and all this. A lot of the treaties haven't been upheld, as we all know. Um, you know, I think we'd get better healthcare as soon as he gets out of there. We wouldn't have to worry about a lot of the stuff that's happening with the defunding on reservations, with our elderly and so forth. Um, I think that it's a big push to get him out of there to help the Native American, you know, the Native American people all around. They're all getting, you know, they're all getting screwed. And it's not like us here on and like in the cities and so forth. You know, I mean, we're still getting the raw end of the stick. But when you go to the reservations, there's a lot of reservations out there that don't have the resources available to them, you know, readily. So when you take those away, like the subsidies with EBT and with the free lunch programs and all that stuff, when you start defunding those and taking those away, that totally 100% impacts the reservations and indigenous people. That's what I was talking about. Our genocide is still continuing right now. You know, that's the way I look at it. Once you start taking away resources to people that help them live and live a better life, that's a form of genocide in my eyes. So that's where I'd go with that. So I mean, like, I didn't mean to wander off.
Like I envision, I feel as Indigenous people, we spend a lot of time, like I said at No Kings, like the dystopia already happened to us. The apocalypse happened to our ancestors. One of the things I always like to point out, especially for European descendants in America, is before colonization hit you on your own continent across the pond, you also were connected to the land. You also had concepts and religions and belief systems that you were also connected to every living thing on this planet, and the reciprocity for all living things in the planet that you lived on was a part of your being. So where I'm going with this is that what's good for Indigenous people is good for everybody. And where I'm going with that is when you take what the founding fathers stole when they were building this country and tried to copy was like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy principles and the Great Law of Peace. They took concepts from that were really good, but they didn't take all the concepts. For example, they didn't allow women in leadership with the clan mothers to make decisions about conflict resolution, about how we structure society and the laws that we follow. Because they didn't respect women. And that right there is a fundamental disconnect with why our society can be so broken, is that we don't have respect for life givers. We don't have respect for gender expansive binaries. The fact that we put everything in a box, it's male or female, like that's not how Indigenous people lived. While different tribes had different concepts, we respected life out of the gate. I'm rambling. I'm going to bring it. I promise. I'm going to circle in. Ojibwe Bemoan, my native language, we don't have pronouns because we respect humans in their full autonomy. And it was more about your role and what you were doing as opposed to whatever gender we perceived to put you in a box. Again, back to the Haudenosaunee, they also had the 7 generations where the decisions that you make, you needed to understand how that was going to impact your future children. A lot of the issues that we're having with environmental law, for example, would have never flown if we were actually upholding what the Haudenosaunee had in mind for understanding, you know, what fracking is going to do for our children and our children's children. We would know that it was going to mess up the planet and leave them an uninhabitable world, and that would have been unacceptable to us. So essentially, like where I'm going with this is that I don't like the word decolonize. I like the word indigenize. Because if we go back to indigenous principles and practices and value systems, both in how we create policy and how we treat each other on a cultural slash social level, we have more respect for each other, we have more respect for our planet, and we're making decisions that benefit everybody, not just a few wealthy shareholders who don't have these same ideals. And people who are evil and corrupt are held accountable and banished from the tribe, for example. So basically, like if we go back to basics and indigenous practices, then we can start building healthcare. We can start building food sovereignty. We're not hoarding wealth. We're not doing this overconsumption while people are starving on the streets. But we can hand out one turkey a day, but we can't feed them beyond the day. So, anyways, I'm rambling now. I'm going to be quiet. I'm talking too much.
That's okay. Just as a follow-up, Tyler had said something to me a while ago, um, saying before, I'm going to be blunt, white people got here, there were no boundaries, there were no states, there were no things like that here. And it made me think, and if there is a change, what would it look like if we didn't have states? And would that be progress? Would that be moving in the right direction?
Hmm. I remember you asking me this. You know, honestly, I think there would be a change. I think it would be a big change. It'd be hard to adapt to as we are all used to having borders now. You know what I mean? But I think it would be a big change. I don't know how it would go about. Um, but it would take a long time for that change. Yeah, and I mean, like there was no borders back in the day. There were no borders that separated all of us. So the indigenous people were from Mexico and from here and so forth. Yeah, I think it'd be a big change, but I think it could be good. Instead of dividing it, I think it would open it up to where we could sort of maybe unify. Maybe that's just a dream, but you know, who knows? I wouldn't. I really don't know really how to answer that because there would be such a profound change doing something like that.
I don't know that I've ever dreamed that granularly with what that would do with when I think about policies and criminal law, that's getting way too in the weeds. I'm curious how that would shake out. I mean, it's true, Tyler, we didn't have borders. We did have territories though, and we talked
Yeah.
about, like our nations respected those territories and but they weren't hard boundaries, I guess is where I was going with that. I mean, even when I was talking about the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace, like that came about because of war and loss of life and the understanding that it was egregious to lose so much life. So people needed to come together and work together, but they weren't territories in the terms of how we think of it, like this is mine and you can't go in. You were looking at your territory. So I'm descended from the Mohawk people as well. So we're the keepers of the Eastern Door. So we were there too. We had our Eastern Door and we were like, all right, this is our territory because we're going to handle what's going on in the Eastern Door to help out our friends in the North and the South and the West and the Central, as opposed to this is the Eastern Door and no one else can come in. Like it's just a flip of like how we look at it. I feel like the way we've been colonized and even how sometimes my brain works is like this is mine and no one else can come in, as opposed to this is my responsibility to take care of to help everyone else around me. So
Yeah.
anyways, I don't know how Colorado, we don't frame it as like I'm doing a good job in Colorado because my friends in Nebraska have less potholes than me. I don't know where I was going with that, but anyways.
All right. Somebody asked, I don't think I'm pronouncing this right. Shella and EMS, is that the organization that you
I
were
don't know if
talking
it's
about?
EMS or not. Like I know her company is named Roadside Remedies, her nonprofit. I was
Okay.
trying to do a quick Google. Like she has a really big social media presence though. So like she's good to follow regardless.
Okay. And then somebody wrote that I'm a 65-year-old woman. My white father married my mother, who was almost half Native American. I am the eldest daughter of an eldest daughter. I don't know how far back that goes, but I was told my great great grandmother was one of the stolen children who was forced to go to white man's school until she was sold to a traveling trader. Before she died, my maternal aunt said we were Lakota. What do I do to find the living relatives who are not from the stolen ones? And is there a genetic test she can take?
Hmm. I really wouldn't know. To tell you the truth, I mean, like you, if you to find out your lineage and your bloodline, that you would have to know certain things that they could research. Like when you go to get your enrollment number, they ask you for your grandparents, your grandmother and grandfather's name, your dad's name, your mother's name, and if you have your grandparents' parents' name, your great great grandparents' name, it makes them easier to follow through. But I wouldn't know how to go about that any other way. I've never had to encounter that, so I wouldn't know. Would you know how to do that, Raven?
I'm also an armchair genealogist. So yes, and so there's a couple of things here. So I didn't get into like nomenclature. So I've been like just using the term indigenous. So what Tyler's talking about is politically and legally, we are American Indian. And that is because of the treaty obligations, and we're citizens of different sovereign nations. So, like, American Indian is actually a political and a legal term that shows our relationship with the US government. Indigenous is kind of the broad term for us, and also obviously includes our relatives to the South, and then there are indigenous people on other continents, et cetera. So there's two things to think about being native. There's one which is your lineage. So you could take a genetic test through like Ancestry or 23andMe, and they break things into those regions. And sometimes it'll pop up that you have indigenous ancestry, and they've gotten a little better with their region, like they're typing whether or not it's like Southern Indigenous, where maybe your family was from South America, or they'll even break it into like North America, like where my DNA shows up because I took one of those tests. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that you will ever be able to be a citizen of like one of the Lakota bands, just because they all have different requirements for enrollment. So you have a genetic piece where you could say, okay, genetically, I do come from indigenous people. The second part of that, though, is when you're getting into your actual ancestry and your heritage. And so it's being able to identify who your ancestor was that at one time was a citizen of one of these nations. If you have names of like your deceased relatives, when you say stolen, I'm assuming either through the boarding school system or they were adopted out, like Canada calls it the 60s scoop, for example. The Indian Child Welfare Act was passed in 1978 to prohibit Native children being stolen and adopted into white families because that was another tool of assimilation. So it could have either been out of a boarding school or it could have been out of adoption. But essentially, you need the names of your relatives. Dead are easier to track with the records. And sometimes you can call enrollment offices and find your relative's name on the rolls. Ancestry has a pretty good database that can pull from some of the Indian census records, depending on which band they were from and which time period. I'm not as familiar with Lakota as I am with like Anishinaabe or like the five civilized tribes, but they are able to be tracked. So essentially, you need names. And then you need to start cross-referencing with databases as you can find them. If it's a boarding school issue, some of the boarding school records, like the pupil attendance records, have been digitized now. Like Carlisle, which was out of Pennsylvania, Indian Industrial School, is fully digitized. Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial School is digitized, and you can also contact the National Archives Record Administration, NARA, for some of that information. You can find me on social media. I know I'm spitting a lot of information at you, but I do love helping people reconnect with their native lineage, and finding their ancestors, because our disconnection is a byproduct of what colonization did. So feel free to hit me up. And I can help you like break this down a little more if you're interested in like finding those ancestors of yours.
I do know that related to what you were saying and relating to what Mary put in the chat, and this is about all I know about it, is that many of the commercial DNA services, the 23s and me's and whatever's still out there, will list a percentage of Native American DNA, but it doesn't break it down by tribe and get any more specific or granular than that. And like Raven said, it's saying I have indigenous blood, and that may be all that you can do. But then when you add it with the other resources, you may be able to get somewhere. So I know.
Also, it'll help you find your living relatives. It'll connect you with your cousins. Sorry, I don't know if I said that explicitly, but like your cousins will pop up. And sometimes you can help connect the dots on lineage and paternity and maternity and all that through those cousins.
Even what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you about something like that?
I don't know. I'm like, probably like hit me up on Facebook, honestly. That's probably where I'm most communicative and where most of my shenanigans happen.
I may need to friend you then.
Mhm.
Welcome to the shit show. Come on in.
Welcome to my world. That's my happy place. So somebody wrote, I have land in the foothills in Livermore, Colorado, where possibly the Ute people lived. Would like to see if a group in the area that have the bloodline would want to do ceremony on the land to reconnect energetically to what had belonged to their people. Is my suggestion any way insensitive, or what is a sensitive way to do that?
Huh. Well, I will tell you the truth. I mean, like talking about offering the land for ceremonies and so forth.
Georgette, you want to answer?
Okay. Someone had kind of responded when I put it out there. This is a little off topic, but I feel and believe that the people that lived in the area for a long time, that there is a sacred and powerful bond to the land. And I feel like part of the healing for people coming full circle and to Mother Gaia, whatever you want to call it, no one ever really talks about that, because I just think there's a connection and energy there. And I'm not saying I can offer up to just give my land away, because also when I am no longer on the land, it is something to pass on to my children, when I sell it at some point. But I'm talking about a relationship between a people and their soul and their mother. And I don't hear anyone talking about that part of the process of healing, besides being recognized about the atrocities that happened. How can we help now? I just feel there's a lot more that needs to happen energetically for the healing. And so it's 76 acres. It's where you make a connection to where once you make the connection, you don't necessarily have to stay on it, but it's healing for the land and it's healing for the people, or for the soul of the people, I believe. So that's what I mean by all of that. And I'll leave it at that. Okay.
I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't really know. I haven't had anybody ask that. I mean, like, were you trying to research that by any chance to see if it is, on like native land, or if there's history behind it on there, or?
Well, even on the Larimer County site, City of Fort Collins, the information is that the Ute were the ones that were more up in the foothills, and I'm just shy of 8,000 feet. So it's just so the presence was there. It was a people that had the connection there. That is, and it's so much more. It's not about who just lives there. It's like the soul of the people who live there,
Yeah.
the land, the energy. And it's just something no one's talking about. That I believe is still something that needs to happen. So I was just going to say, and I do know some people that do ceremonies in different ways, that do some of the Sundance ceremonies up in the northern states. But I just believe there's more to be done, and I have the opportunity. 76 acres. It's a powerful site anyway. I can sense it and feel it, and that's why I'm the one who asked about, are there any groups um, in the Fort Collins area that where if something resonates, pass my info and get a hold of me, because I just think it's something that hasn't been talked about that could be very healing. So I won't take up more time. I think I've done my 2 minutes plus. Okay. Okay. Okay.
I don't know what organizations to like to reach out to, and I mean, like on my end, I'm an activist. I don't know. I really don't know the resources when it comes to stuff like like that. I'm more of the get out there, get loud, and get rowdy style. Activist. I like to go out there, be vocal about it and stuff. And as I go along, I start getting resources and meeting more people. I started this 9 months ago. So all these questions that y'all are asking are really, really great, because then now I'm going to kick back and I'm going to start researching those, because I want to know how to answer those. It's like everything is the learning process still, with me. And now Raven, on the other hand, geez Louise, man, if I could only have a pinky's worth of that knowledge she has, that'd be awesome. I learn everything from her pretty much. I'm learning so much from her. It's amazing. So maybe she might be able to answer that better than I could.
I think I know what you're getting at, Georgette. So I don't have a particular individual in mind, but what I like happens is that you just drop this in the universe and something's probably going to pop up in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to be like, "Hey, I actually know someone." So where I'm going with this, like Tyler, like when you think about like Lee Plenty Wolf, Lee is able to conduct ceremony like Sundance on a property owner up in like Brighton, for example. He has an agreement to like conduct those ceremonies up there. So the possibility is absolutely there. I just don't know of anyone right now, obviously, because I'm not Ute for one. Also, Ojibways are not part of the 51 historic tribes to Colorado, the land-based tribes. But I absolutely like where you're going with that, Georgette. And being able to allow people to reconnect with their ancestral homelands. So I have a feeling something's going to pop up, and the universe just spun this in a really good way for us.
I'd like to comment that as an aging white guy, I can't comment whether it would be appropriate or not to do something like that. But from my perspective, I would say owning the land might be problematic given the history of Native Americans and having their land taken. With that being said, I agree that the intention is very positive, and it is bridge building back to where the people came from. If it were me, I would contact the Ute tribe directly and invite them to have a ceremony, have a powwow, have something on your land, and ask what is it they would want to do and how they would feel comfortable, and extend an invitation to come and do something on their land and use it in that way. But that's, like I said, just my aging white guy perspective on it. Um, and then that is the last question I have listed. Go ahead, Tiffany.
We were honored to be invited to the first Arvada powwow, and met some really amazing people there. Saw some amazing dancers. It was a really awesome experience. What is the next powwow that people could attend if they wanted to?
The next powwow is December 31st at Lincoln High School. It's the New Year's Eve powwow. Starts at 6 p.m. and goes, I believe, until 1:30 in the morning.
Yep, that sounds
I
right.
think it's Yeah, I think it's a pretty big, pretty long one. It's going to be a fun one though.
It'll be a good one. We're kind of like
Yeah.
in off powwow season right now. So like the ones that are popping up are a little more sporadic. Whereas once you Denver March powwow kicks off the powwow season, which typically like runs through the summer, but the New Year's Eve powwow is a good one.
Yeah. And then we have one that we're putting together at the Denver Indian Center on February 14th, which is our Sweetheart and Two Spirits powwow on Valentine's Day. So yeah, we'll be putting out some information about that, but that'll be the one after the New Year's powwow.
Nice. Thank you.
Hmm.
Like I said, that is the last of the questions that I have listed, but there are two things, Raven, that you said that I want to follow up on. Um, I want to draw the connection between Columbus Day and Thanksgiving Day because we all know what happened with Columbus Day. He wasn't the first to discover the the new world, and he wasn't uh, well a good person in any way, and that all came to light long after it became a social institution, and we have seen over time at least some of the thinking regarding that holiday change. I feel there's a parallel to Thanksgiving that, you know, the way people see it and approach it in their daily lives is very different from the underlying start of what it really meant and what really happened. And I think seeing the holiday in a different light than what other people are taught is important. And I just want to make that connection. And then when it comes to the rampant consumerism that you talked about and the overeating and the food waste and all of that, um, we are participating in the mass blackout. And the I put the website in the chat. I'll put it in again. And this is a way to fight against that conspicuous consumption for no good reason, and specifically to do it in a way to hurt the billionaires and the powers that be by taking this big event that's supposed to bring all this money in for them and not giving it to them and not spending that money and not having it work and not needing to buy things that nobody needs just because it's 10% off. So, we are supporting that idea as well. And I just wanted to point that out and connect with what you were saying that, it's not just something that we can sit here on a Zoom and talk about, that, we need to go out and we need to do it in the real world as well when we follow up. And that's core to what we as solidarity warriors do and want to teach people.
Put some more info on the mass blackout in the chat. You guys can click on the little down arrow if you want to read those slides and check them out later.
Great.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we close it out tonight?
No, I've talked so much tonight. Thank you for indulging me in my big fat mouth.
Your
We
big
love
fat
hearing you
mouth is
speak.
welcome anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope that you have some very important and interesting conversations with your family.